Welcome to episode 2 of What Type of Bitch Are You? Today we're going to discuss bitch number 2, the ball buster. So continuing from the last video where we talked about stage 1, the bimbo, this is just a playful take on David Deida's 3 stages of feminine development. So let's start by recapping the last video, which is also linked below. The bimbo is characterized by 3 key words: superficial, dependent, fearful. This is a very painful stage, but also a very natural stage for us to be in, because humans have evolved to have a fear of rejection. As cavemen, it did not help our survival to be shunned by the group. But this pain can be a good thing. This pain forces us to go within and find our inner strength. In the second stage, instead of relying on external sources of love, we learn to love ourselves. Instead of betraying ourselves for scraps of love from others, as the bimbo does, the ball buster learns to stand up for herself and meet her own needs. As we progress through the 3 different stages, our ability to love and experience bliss becomes deeper and deeper. The 3 key words for the bimbo were superficial, dependent, fearful. As the feminine steps more into her power in the second stage, those 3 keywords become: first, driven. She now has a purpose, a mission. She will sacrifice love and approval from others for her greater goal. She works hard and provides her own structure for her life. Boundaries. Compared to the bimbo, who was a people pleaser, the bimbo didn't say no for fear of disapproval from others. Not the ball buster. Ball buster knows what she wants. She cares more for respect than for love and approval, so she has no issues stating her needs. Independence. This is the most important characteristic for the ball buster. She is no longer dependent on others for her validation. She moves from external to internal validation, and she loves herself fiercely. Ball buster is a force to be reckoned with. So in my last video, we started with Leanne's story. We left off with Leanne being in a dark place. Her husband was going through giving her physical abuse, emotional abuse, but she was trapped in the relationship because she felt like she depended on her husband for her finances, her sense of validation, her child. And so now we're going to continue her story because we do touch upon abuse. There's a trigger warning here. So her husband hasn't been doing very well at work, and he's picked up a drinking habit. His drinking habit's been getting worse, and after a particularly grueling day at work, he flew into this alcohol-driven rage and threw a large brass candlestick at Leanne. Leanne used her reflexes to dodge, and the candlestick narrowly missed her, but it clipped the face of her child behind her. Something in Leanne snapped at that point. She knew she never wanted her child to be endangered by him again. She hated living in fear and in pain all the time. And a part of her, a wise part of her, knew that there was a better life waiting for her. So all these years of her pent-up pain, frustration, resentment erupted in the form of her grabbing the candlestick and hitting him back. In his moment of confusion, she grabbed her child and ran to her car, not stopping to pick up any belongings. She drove straight to her sister's place. Thankfully, her sister was a social worker and was able to get Leanne the legal help she needed to be safe. Now, as stressful as the legal stuff was for Leanne, the hardest work was yet to come. While Leanne had a brief awakening at rock bottom, she still holds on to many first-stage beliefs and her low self-worth. So that if she didn't reprogram herself, per se, she would most likely end up with another abusive or narcissistic partner. And so it's imperative for her to begin the work of self-reflection, healing her trauma, developing self-worth, so that she can face rejection to set proper boundaries. So Leanne was determined. She vowed never to allow herself to be abused by a man or be so dependent on a man again. This became her obsession, and she devoured any book, video, or seminar on the topic. Leanne wanted to be free. She wanted to be free from needing someone to like her. She wanted to be free to just to be her own woman and live her own life. Eventually, Leanne became so knowledgeable and passionate on the subject of domestic violence, she was hired as the director of a leading nonprofit for abuse survivors. She poured herself into her work. Her purpose was to help other women in situations that she had been in herself. She wanted to help them reach the potential, the joy, the freedom of being your own independent woman. So Leanne was very happy in her career, and she started exploring relationships again. In relationships now, Leanne did not tolerate any abusive behavior. She was able to communicate clearly what she liked and didn't like. The men she attracted into her life now were very respectful and sensitive to her needs. They also gave her plenty of space for her to pursue her mission. And she's definitely exponentially happier now than she was in her marriage. She's got a great career, a very kind partner, but there was still a part of her that felt unfulfilled. A part of her that remembers the giddy feeling of completely losing herself to the love of a man and being passionately ravished or maybe even roughly taken by a dominant man. But she would banish those thoughts. Men should be respectful. There should be no room for abuse, even in the bedroom. We need to treat each other with respect, she thought instead. So her current relationship, while fair and balanced, felt lukewarm. There was no sizzling passion. In fact, her relationship felt more like a business partnership than a love story. In fact, they had spreadsheets to keep track of chores, and meeting agendas were their conversations. But Leanne was afraid. She was afraid of totally losing herself and becoming dependent again. However, the masculine desires merging with the feminine, especially the trait of feminine receptivity. And now her relationship is like a dance where there's two people trying to lead instead of a lead and a follow. There's no flow of energy because Leanne didn't want to relinquish her control over her direction. So her partner had no choice but to respect her space instead of deeply penetrating her with his love. Her boundaries helped her feel safe, but because they were so rigid, they also kept her man out of her heart. So here we will pause Leanne's story until the next video, where she dives even deeper to search for greater fulfillment in the form of being a stage 3 bitch. We can see that the evolution from a bimbo to a ballbuster can take an immense amount of pain and hitting rock bottom first. That's not always the case. Some people can learn without pain, but for me, definitely, this was what I went through. This is not just Leanne's story, it's also my story. And it took many years of painfully cutting off pieces of myself in order to feel love from others before I realized that something had to change. Then resulted in more years of self reflection, healing from trauma, liking myself again before I was comfortable even saying no to the smallest things and learning to set boundaries. So I'm definitely still in my second stage, learning to be more of second stage. And just want to say that in the last slide, we saw that rigid boundaries can keep deep love out. But I'm not here to knock boundaries. Boundaries are important. Boundaries are absolutely essential for a good life. A life where we can overflow and give to others from a place of generosity rather than neediness. Boundaries are necessary so that we can become loving instead of resentful. In the next video, we'll talk more about appropriate boundary setting so they're not too rigid. So how do I know if I'm a ball buster? First trait, driven. How important is your mission to you? Are you ruthless in chasing after your goals? Do you place your career ahead of your relationship? The ball busters can be characterized by the career woman who commands deep respect in the office and is highly competent, but perhaps her domestic life and relationship are put on the back burner and might not be doing as well. Next, boundaries. Can you state clearly what you want and don't want? Can you say no to the things that don't serve you? That's another reason why she's called the ball buster. She has no issues saying no, even to her romantic partner. Lastly, independent. How dependent are you on the love of another? The ballbuster is independent in many ways, not just emotionally. She stands on her own 2 feet when it comes to her life, her career, her relationship. She likes being in a relationship, but she knows that she doesn't need one. She receives her validation internally, so that's from her own self talk, her character, her accomplishments. So she's no longer needy for external validation, such as the approval of others. The ballbuster is kind of a badass. And this second stage is kind of the stage that's favored by modern society. However, in this second stage, we're out of touch with our native sexual essence. Because in the second stage, we're learning to cultivate our opposite trait. So we're learning to cultivate our masculine here. So that shows up in the form of cultivating our purpose and our independence. And it's necessary that we move through the second stage and cultivate and become a whole human being before moving to the third stage. But because we're out of touch with this native sexual essence, we feel discontentment both in life and in our relationship because it can lead to those depolarized, lukewarm relationships and just generally being out of touch with the juiciness of life. That's what that makes the radiant feminine. So we've got to keep diving deeper in ourselves to reach that final stage of bitchiness, the being of love, the third stage. This being of love is completely secure in herself, which allows her to relax and open to others. She's in touch with her divine core of love, her goddess energy. So stay tuned for the next video where I'll go more in depth into the third stage bitch. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know any comments or questions below. We'll see you in the next one.